Students, what's your, well, that happened moment in the classroom? At my school, we sometimes have dogs come and check the lockers for illicit substances. They always announce it like, "Teachers, please do not let students leave the classroom for the next bit of time." Everyone knows what it means, and one kid in my class grabbed his bag and jumped over 3 desks and ran out of the classroom. Turns out he was an entrepreneur of sorts. A physics class in community college. Professor was explaining conservation of angular momentum and had a kid sit on a tall chair that spins. He then had the kid hold 2 books out with extended arms and then spin as fast as he can before telling the kid to pull the books in close to his chest. Think of a figure skater and how they spin really fast. The kid immediately turns into a blur and the stool/chair starts to tip slightly until it rockets from under him like it was shot from a slingshot. The kid slams into the floor as if he got choke-slammed, and his head hit the floor in a way that sounded like someone dropped an overly ripe melon. The look on the professor's face said, "Well, that was a good run. Guess I have to find a new career now." Kid turned out okay, and everyone got a laugh, but it genuinely looked like I just witnessed a death. This wasn't my class, but it was the talk of the school for a while. A well-liked teacher gave her class a free workday and offered to play some music. Upon opening her iTunes, she found a file named Transformers MP4. Curious, she opened it. It turned out to be a hardcore adult flick that blasted through the entire class at full volume. Panicking, she couldn't figure out how to shut it off, so she ran the laptop, open and still blasting at full volume, down the hallway to the office to reduce exposure to students. It turns out the superintendent's son used one of the shared servers to browse and download the video, so it was accessible by every computer connected to the school network. The superintendent resigned a couple of years later. In high school physics, we were waiting for the teacher to show up, and another physics teacher from another class comes in with a bowling ball and says, "Do you guys think I can dribble this?" Everyone just looks at him incredulously, and he begins to repeatedly and heavily strong-arm the bowling ball onto the floor hard enough for it to rebound high enough that he can keep the momentum going. People start to laugh, but after about 5 or 6 bounces, the ball splits in half as it hits the floor. He quickly scoops up the halves, holds a conspiratorial finger to his lips, and shuffles out the door. About 15 seconds later, our physics teacher comes in, looks at the few dusty chips of bowling ball on the floor, and asks, "What was all that noise? What's this mess on the floor?" A kid fell out of the restroom ceiling and broke the whole ceiling. And in a different classroom, someone got thrown across the room into a wall. Guy with anger issues started yelling at the teacher and then slapped her across the face. Keep in mind, this fat kid was huge, and the teacher was this old, tiny Asian woman. The nicest guy in the class smokes the guy with a sucker right hand and just puts the guy out cold. When my teacher brought his samurai sword and started yelling random samurai cries while trying to teach us about ancient Japan. Quite the period we had that day. When I fell asleep in the first row, and the professor and the other students started clapping to wake me up, and when I woke up, I also started clapping like a moron. 2 things you need to know. First, there was this guy at my school whom I've now known for 25 years. His thing is to scream, "Frick yeah!" at everything. He's done it since I've known him. In case it wasn't obvious, frick is a YouTube-friendly term for what he actually said. Anytime someone mentions Matt, someone always adds a "Frick yeah!" He is huge and very loud. When he comes in the bar, he announces his presence with an exuberant "Frick yeah!" If he calls you, you say hello and he yells "Frick yeah!" You get the picture. Second, my senior year. It was a thing to sneak vodka into the school in Cinnabon mugs. For some inexplicable reason, plastic Cinnabon mugs were like a huge thing. Sashaying around flaunting your Cinnabon mug. Rolls eyes. Anyway, I'm in post-lunch class one day and one of the Cinnabon vodka girls ups and starts puking bright hot pink, fruity vomit out the window behind her. Then she stood up and screamed, "Woo! Frick yeah!" at the top of her lungs with her face covered in puke. Frick yeah dude is also in this class, so he immediately screams, "Frick yeah!" back. Then she yells, "Frick yeah!" and they go back and forth yelling, "Frick yeah! Frick yeah!" getting progressively louder with each one until the teacher gets her and ushers her out of the room. The rest of us just sat there like, WTF was that all about? This happened like 2 to 3 semesters ago at my college. I was in finance class about 10 minutes from it ending. It was around 2:30, and I had to work at 4:30. Planned on hitting the gym between. Typical day, was getting ready to go by drinking my pre-workout in the last 10 minutes of class. Well, it turns out someone had a different plan. We get an email that the school is in a legitimate lockdown. There is a questionable man on campus with a tactical vest and large backpack walking around campus. Oh boy. So here's the reactions to this information. 50% of the class immediately panics. No idea what to do, huddles in the corner texting their loved ones, one chick bawling her eyes out, making all the noise, puked in the corner. Sick. Foreign exchange student whips out his laptop and starts a League of Legends game, getting visibly agitated at the back of the room. Frickin' Yasuo, am I right? Teacher breaks a piece of metal off the vent and stands by the door prepared to what looks like kill Julius Caesar. Professor in the adjacent room, connecting door, walks in and explains that we should all calm down because worst case scenario is we die and we get a cool plaque with our name on it in the hallway. This does not help the students already having anxiety, may I note. I'm over here, phone dying, absolutely yeeted to crap on pre-workout, with the inability to expend this energy. Wondering if I'll get fired for a no-call, no-show, and feeling 99% peed off rather than scared. Look to the left out the window, SWAT team on the roof.jpg. Had this sketchy man come into our room. I'm of the utmost confidence that he would have walked away without harming a single human, simply because it was apparent that God left this classroom a long time ago, and we were in more hysteria alive than dead. Anyways, 2.5 hours later, I'm able to call my boss after we were allowed to leave and tell him that the kid who got reported as simply a student going to class and had a big backpack. There was no vest. The kid who reported him had already gotten into trouble for trying to start a racial conflict a week prior and had just had an agenda to push. The amount of pissed I was immeasurable. In a full auditorium, a random guy from a higher year entered. He yelled, "Ladies, this one's for you," and then proceeded to take off his shirt and trousers, his boxers still on, luckily. He then flexed his biceps and did different poses in front of hundreds of students sitting there, not knowing how to react. He then left saying, "Sorry to bother you," to the lecturer. Oh well. Apparently he bet with his friends to do this for 3 troughs of strong beer. Alright, I'm going to tell the listeners what I told the university board. I was peer pressured and I was the victim. Go into the bathroom and open the door. The professor is there, pooping. We make eye contact and I freeze. He slowly reaches for handle to close the door. So naturally, I shake his hand because I'm the world's biggest dum-dum. Not a student anymore, but we had a supply English teacher that had the good old habit of liking a little drink in the classroom. He used to pull a small bottle of vodka out of the drawer and take a small sip every few minutes while trying to be sly about it. Well, after a while, one of the students told a teacher about it, and then the supply teacher was found on his lunch break watching Netflix and drinking a glass of wine in the classroom. Funny thing is, he stayed on as a teacher for another 3 months before being totally kicked out for a similar thing. 9th grade, for reference. Everyone was being super loud, so we were pretty much unable to discern anything short of our own table. Just as the teacher is coming in and everyone is quieting down, this one kid just loudly talking and telling this one girl, who looks really effing uncomfortable, "It's 4 inches," with the most proud voice ever. "Some of the guys in my school were bullcrapping loudly before class, and one of them said pretty loudly, 'Yeah, mine's huge, effing gigantic, like 6 inches of man meat.' The guy he was talking to just kind of gave him a funny look and one said, 'Dude, 6 inches is like average.' Saw a kid die on the inside that day. You know it's bad when you exaggerate and your exaggeration isn't really impressive." I took business English my senior year of high school. We had to do a presentation on a made-up business. 2 kids did a presentation on a frozen yogurt place that was like, make your own yogurt thing. You would squeeze the flavors and stuff out of fake cow udders. Straight from the teat was the name of the business. It was a long day. "Gentlemen, I'm interested in franchising." Freshman year of college, I had one professor who would randomly call on students in class, and if they didn't answer correctly, he would proceed to give them a roast in front of the whole class for their lack of knowledge on the subject material. I was in the class with a few of my good friends, as it was a prerequisite that we all needed to have. Even though we got our fair share of roasting from him as well, we all thought it was funny and knew it was his way of making sure the students are engaged in the lecture. About halfway through the semester, he called on one person, and after she incorrectly answered, he started to casually roast this student. At this point, another girl raised her hand to get the professor's attention. After he called on her, she proceeded to vocally berate him about how he was treating us all like children, as well as call him every vulgar word she could think of. At this point, he's shouting back at her too, complete with all the same vulgarities that she used on him, and me and my friends are just sitting in the back, laughing under our breath while simultaneously being completely dumbfounded that this kind of stuff actually happens in college. Finally, he yells at her to leave lecture. She obliges, and as soon as she is out of the room, he proceeds to roast her even more to the class. It was so odd to see something like this, especially since I had just come from high school a few months before. Man, college is wild. Ex-student here. This was a long time ago. We sent whispers around the classroom to all drop our books on the ground, pretending it was by accident when the clock on the wall hit an exact time. When it happened, our teacher was in the middle of writing on the chalkboard, and she turned around, shocked, to find us all picking up our books. She cried after that, and we all started to feel really bad. Learned later that she had just had a miscarriage and was just trying to get through her day and not think about it. We broke through that face she was putting on by accident. Sorry, Teach. We didn't know you, and we all liked you. I'm sorry for the emotional whiplash there, folks, but since I found this story, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it while writing this particular episode. So there it is. I went to a small college and our classroom sizes were very small, 15 to 25 people, so we got to know everyone pretty well. There was this one guy who came in so high that he fell off his chair. Thankfully, the professor was relatively chill, so she let him go home. Not my story, but my friend told me how on the first day of class, during introductions and icebreakers, this girl got up and ran toward the door. She didn't make it and threw up all over the place, looked around her, and completely horrified, left the class. She came back for her stuff later. I have the same reaction to icebreakers. Tell us one fun fact about yourself. Also, another time, my professor knew I was turning 21 the night before, and when I came in the next morning, completely hungover and dead, he and the whole class applauded me. It was nice. Back in 8th grade middle school, we had this really cool and chill US history teacher. He never raised his voice and was pretty laid back about class and work. He taught in a storytelling kind of manner, and I don't even remember annotating any document in his class. Well, we had that one kid. In this story, I'm going to call him Jim. Jim was always late to class and never turned stuff in. He was that one really cringy kid that everyone either hated or pitied. My teacher never really got fed up with him and would always show his distaste for him in his facial expressions. My teacher normally would pull him aside to talk to him about his tardiness or missing assignments. Jim would say he would be earlier/do the assignments, but he never did. One day, Jim walks in late again. My teacher is about to start teaching, and then he turns and sees Jim walking in. Well, this time, my teacher wasn't so happy about it. It was the middle of the school year toward the end, and my teacher must have gotten so fed up with Jim at that point. My teacher yells Jim's name at the top of his lungs. He normally had a boomy voice, but when he yelled, it amplified 100 times over. The ground literally shook when he yelled, and I'm sure they could hear him downstairs at the other end of the school. Our school wasn't that small either. For the rest of the class period, about 30 minutes, literally it was dead silent. Everyone was still kind of shocked from it. Someone asked, "Meth, can I cook it?" in chemistry. Another person asked our math teacher who was going home to Canada over break if she could threaten to kill his mum who lives there. Same person told the same teacher that he couldn't do the work because he has 100 extra chromosomes. He doesn't. She responded by saying, "That explains why you look like that." As somebody who seems to just have a really strong idiot magnet located within their person, I sympathize heavily with these teachers and their rotating clown show of students. I remember being maybe in 2nd grade and this one kid in our class kept yelling trash through the window at some 10th to 11th grader that was standing outside our windows. Our window was easy to climb in and out as it wasn't placed at a high level from the ground. Dude that was standing outside got annoyed with him, I guess, and just jumped on the windowsill, which was pretty wide, and said something along the lines of, "You kids should not be saying things like this. I'm older and won't do anything, but someone in this life will at some point if you keep this behavior. then went back to his friends or whatever like nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Our whole class of second graders was shocked. I know it would have been more interesting if I remembered the details, but it happened a long time ago. Okay, so this happened a while ago, so I might not have all the details. So I was on the school bus and we weren't allowed to eat on the bus. So the kids behind me were talking about lunch tomorrow and one of them said, "Yeah, I can bring bacon." I was hungry, so I said, "Bacon? Who's bringing bacon?" The bus driver overheard me, but didn't know it was me, stopped the bus and yelled, "Bacon? Who has bacon?" Then he walked down the aisle and looked to see who had the bacon. It was so funny, but you kind of had to be there. First day of school, freshman year in woodshop. Teacher just finishes showing us a safety video on proper use of how to use a table saw. Then he was about to give a demonstration and said, "Now, you're going to see me do things a little differently than how you just saw it being done in the video you just watched. But that's just because I'm a professional, and I have been doing this for over 30 years. Teacher then proceeded to immediately cut off 3 of his fingers with the saw at the front of the classroom. Blood was spraying everywhere. He was screaming, holding his hand. Guys I was with in the back of the class started laughing, thinking it was a prank. Girl in the front of the class projectile vomited. A few of us helped him and his fingers on the floor and went and got the nurse. Someone called an ambulance. They were able to reattach them at the hospital. Wood class was cancelled for the rest of the year, and we all took some home economics in its place. This was an amazing reads username, totally made up story? Damn it! When I was in college, I was sitting in a geology lecture center when someone dressed in a banana costume crashes in, does a lap around the room, then gets chased out of the room by a guy in a gorilla suit who came in after him. Was in a math class when a random student fell into the classroom and simply yelled, "You pushed me too hard, shifthead." He got up and left as if nothing really happened. The class laughed their butts off, including my math teacher. That's something I only see in cartoons. In high school, this big-sized metalhead was always late for the first class period of the day because he was hanging out in the hallway with his girlfriend for too long and never gave himself enough time to walk to the classroom. My teacher was a real laid-back kind of guy and had a flowing sort of teaching style. He really didn't mind, but one day he got annoyed because he knew the reason. He told the dude that he could say goodbye to his girlfriend a few minutes earlier and get to class on time. There was a little back and forth as this metalhead attempted to bluff and lie his way into some type of excuse. The teacher wasn't having it and said that he had to come to class on time once. He said, "You have to do it once. If you don't get to this class on time tomorrow, you're going to have to stay after school for detention." There was back and forth as this metalhead attempted to determine the seriousness of this threat. It seemed pretty serious. The teacher said he'd make the kid help clean the classroom. The next morning, we're all in there, the bell rings, and the teacher opens his mouth to speak. Suddenly from the hallway is the thunderous sound of someone wearing heavy boots running down it toward the room. Accompanying this is a deep-throated scream. "No!" The teacher looks at the class in shock as the door flies open and there is one last thunderous clap from a boot being stomped as the metalhead enters the room. Out of breath, this kid casually walks to his seat and says in his deep raspy voice, "I don't know what they're screaming about out there." I doubt that anyone else in the school could have yelled like that. There was a guy who sat in the front row of one of my classes when I was in community college. He would just bring fresh vegetables and just eat like a squash and cauliflower raw during class. Oh, persistent loud lecture eaters, how I haven't missed you, or the universal strong body odors your community of public munchers seems to share. 2 girls in a fight. One of them German suplexed the other into a table. I know that sounds like wrestling, but my teacher in 8th grade had an old wooden table next to her desk to hold extra books and stuff. Girls fought over a dude, I think, and after the slapping and hair pulling, it happened. This is in a college lecture hall, but with not too many students. During class, we heard female moans. At first, we each thought that they were hearing things, so nobody responded. 5 minutes later, the moans got even louder, and we turned around to the source. We thought it was probably someone watching an adult movie who accidentally forgot to plug their headphones in. The dude was one hand deep into the girl sitting next to him. Her short skirt was hiked up. I was sitting in my physics class trying to stay awake because that class is one of the first classes of the day, and I didn't get much sleep the night before. I sit at a table in the back of the class by myself. The table to my left has 2 of my friends and 1 other student sitting at it. I forget exactly what was being taught that day, but I remember my friends suddenly saying things like, "Oh my God, are you all right? And maybe you should go to the nurse." I looked over to see my friends grabbing tissues and giving them to the other student whose nose was bleeding, which wouldn't be such a problem if there wasn't so much blood pouring out from this guy's nose. It was concerning, to say the least. Our teacher told him to go and see the nurse. He nodded, stood up, and then heeled out of the room. It was probably the weirdest thing I have seen in a while.